The hallway of the shelter was as silent as a church pew on a Tuesday morning. Only the soft buzz of the overhead lights and the occasional rustle of paws behind steel bars broke the stillness. Beau Carver walked with his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn canvas jacket. His boots moved slowly across the concrete floor, each step heavy with reluctance. At 63, Beau carried the wear of a man who had seen more than he ever talked about. His silver-streaked hair and deep-set eyes gave him a quiet intensity, but since the passing of his dog, the house had grown too quiet. It was his neighbor, Lena Ray, who pushed him to visit the shelter. "Just look," she'd said. "You don't have to bring one home." As Beau neared the end of the kennels, something stopped him cold. A young German shepherd, no more than a year old, stood stiff inside the last enclosure, staring straight at him. The dog's tail didn't wag. Its ears didn't twitch. Instead, it let out a low, trembling whine, as if it recognized him. Beau paused. There was something in that sound, something hauntingly familiar. He crouched slowly, drawn in by the dog's eyes, wide, glassy, and filled with a sadness that didn't belong to a stray. "That one's Baxter," a soft voice called from behind. Hattie Bloom, one of the longtime volunteers, walked up with a clipboard in hand. "He don't usually make a sound for anyone. Picked him up a few weeks ago off Route 19. No tags, no chip, no nothing." Beau didn't look away from the dog. Baxter had pressed his body close to the gate, his nose poking through the bars, paw lifted like he was reaching for something he'd lost. Or someone. Beau reached out gently. Baxter didn't flinch. Instead, he nudged his head against Beau's palm with quiet desperation. Then Beau saw it, a faint scar along Baxter's front left paw. And suddenly a memory stirred. Years ago, during one of those long, blurry nights on a private security detail overseas, his partner Silas Rourke had trained a shepherd. The dog had been protective, loyal, a little too emotionally intuitive for military work. Silas had called him Baxter. But that couldn't be. Could it? Where exactly was he found? Beau asked, standing slowly. "Just past the old Colton place, right off the main road," Hattie replied. Beau's breath hitched. That was Silas Rourke's old family land, abandoned since the funeral. Baxter let out another soft whimper, now pacing, clearly agitated by something unseen. And Beau couldn't shake the feeling that this dog remembered a part of his past he had tried for years to forget. Beau couldn't sleep that night. The image of Baxter's eyes lingered in his mind like smoke that wouldn't clear. There was no denying what he'd felt in that brief moment at the shelter. It wasn't just connection. It was recognition. That scar on the paw, the way the dog looked at him, the precise, almost military stillness in his posture. Baxter wasn't some ordinary stray. He was tied to something deeper, older, maybe even buried beneath years of silence. And if he really was that Baxter, then Silas Rourke wasn't as far from memory as Beau had tried to make him. The next morning, Beau returned before the shelter even opened. Hattie Bloom looked surprised to see him waiting outside in the chill air, thermos in hand and a quiet resolve in his face. "You here to see the shepherd again?" she asked, unlocking the gate. Beau nodded. No words, just that same look of something unfinished. As Hattie led him down the hallway, Baxter was already at the front of his kennel. Tail still, eyes locked on Beau like he'd been waiting all night. When Beau knelt again, Baxter whimpered and pushed his forehead against the bars. "I want to sit with him," Beau said, quietly but firm. "Not adopt. Just sit." Hattie hesitated. "Technically, we're not supposed to," she started, but something about the way Beau looked at the dog made her stop. "All right, 10 minutes. She unlocked the gate. The moment the latch clicked, Baxter stepped out slowly, not like a dog running free, but like a soldier following protocol. He didn't jump. He didn't bark. He just walked to Beau and sat directly in front of him, as if waiting for orders. Beau sank to the floor cross-legged. Baxter leaned against him, resting his head on Beau's knee. The silence between them was full of something unspoken. For a brief moment, Beau let his hand rest gently on Baxter's side, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of the dog's breath. He closed his eyes and memories rushed in. Silas's voice, low and calm, giving commands. The desert heat, the long nights, the feeling that something was always just beyond the next corner. "What happened to you?" Beau whispered, more to himself than to Baxter. "And why now?" He knew that if this dog really was Silas's, then there were questions that had never been answered, about the night Silas disappeared, about what they'd done overseas, and about what Silas may have left behind. Baxter lifted his head and looked him straight in the eye, as if he understood every word. And Beau realized something chilling. Baxter hadn't just recognized him. He had come looking for him. Later that week, Beau sat at his kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold. Baxter now lay curled beside the old wood stove, eyes half closed but ears alert. After 3 days of supervised visits, Hattie had called him personally. "He's not letting anyone else near him," she said. "That dog chose you, Beau, whether you want it or not." And just like that, Baxter came home. But what started as companionship began to feel like a quiet haunting. Beau couldn't shake the feeling that this dog knew something he didn't. That afternoon, as Beau searched through an old storage chest in the attic, more out of restlessness than intent, he stumbled upon a box marked Silas. Inside were a few dusty photos, a compass, and a folded letter. The envelope had yellowed at the edges, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was Silas's. He never remembered receiving it. Maybe Claire had tucked it away after the funeral, not knowing what to do with it. Beau sat down and opened it, fingers trembling. The letter was short, just 3 paragraphs, but each word hit like a punch to the ribs. Silas had written it just days before his disappearance, mentioning unfinished business, a decision I may not come back from, and finally, "If anything happens to me, look after Baxter. He'll know who to trust." Beau reread that last line until the ink blurred. That couldn't be coincidence. Baxter wasn't just some random dog. Silas had meant for him to find Beau. But why? Beau folded the letter and looked across the room. Baxter had lifted his head now, eyes fixed on him again. That stare, so calm, so deliberate, felt heavier than before. It was as if Baxter had been waiting all these years for someone to finally read those words. And now that Beau had, the real weight of what had been left behind was settling in. Beau rubbed a hand across his jaw and whispered, "What were you into, Silas?" The silence in the house seemed to stretch. Outside, a storm was beginning to roll in, distant thunder, leaves shaking in warning. Baxter got to his feet and padded slowly to Beau's side, sitting beside him without making a sound. He looked up at the letter still clutched in Beau's hand, then rested his head against Beau's leg, grounding him. Whatever was coming next, Baxter wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a witness. The next morning, Beau stood outside an old trailer on the edge of town, the kind that hadn't seen fresh paint or a visitor in years. The mailbox still read W. Colton, and that was all the confirmation he needed. Wade Colton had served with him and Silas overseas. Quiet man, sharp eyes, always had one hand on his belt buckle like he was guarding something. If anyone knew what Silas was involved in before disappearing, it was Wade. Beau hadn't seen him in over a decade, not since Silas's funeral. And even then, Wade had kept to the back, saying nothing. He knocked twice, then again harder. After a long pause, the door creaked open a few inches, and a tired pair of eyes peeked through the gap. Beau Carver. The voice was raspier than he remembered, but it was him. Beau nodded. "I need to talk to you. About Silas." There was a pause. Wade didn't say a word, just opened the door the rest of the way and gestured him in without emotion. The trailer smelled of dust and old tobacco. A broken ceiling fan spun lazily above, clicking every few seconds. Wade sat down heavily in a sunken recliner, motioning for Beau to take the wooden chair across from him. "What's this about?" he asked. Beau didn't waste time. He pulled the letter from his coat pocket, unfolded it, and placed it on the table between them. Wade didn't touch it, just stared. "Found it in a box marked with Silas's name," Beau said. "He mentioned Baxter. Said if anything happened, the dog would find me." At the mention of the dog's name, Wade's eyes flicked up sharply. That told Beau everything he needed to know. Wade remembered Baxter. He's alive, Beau added. He's with me now. Silence stretched between them like a crack in glass. Finally, Wade leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice low. We shouldn't be talking about this. Beau narrowed his eyes. What the hell does that mean? Wade looked past him, like someone else might be listening. It means Silas didn't disappear. He left, on purpose, and he wasn't supposed to come back. Beau's jaw clenched. He was running from something? Wade stood and walked to a small cabinet, pulling out a flask. He took a long swig before answering. He wasn't running, he said. He was hiding something. Beau rose to his feet slowly. Baxter, still waiting in the truck, felt further away now. Because Beau knew, deep in his gut, this wasn't just about a missing friend or a lost dog. It was about a secret someone had killed to keep buried. That night, back home, Beau sat at the kitchen table long after the lights were off. Baxter lay at his feet, eyes open, head resting on his paws. The silence was loud. Wade's words circled his mind like a wasp trapped in a jar. He wasn't running. He was hiding something. But what could Silas have been hiding that involved his dog? A sealed letter, and a warning that no one was meant to read. Beau knew one thing for sure: he needed to know more. Not just for himself, but for Baxter. The dog hadn't just appeared in his life. He'd been sent. Unable to sleep, Beau rummaged through the box from the attic again. Most of it was meaningless: old photos, faded maps, a pocket knife. But then, at the very bottom, something new. A photograph folded in half, hidden beneath a crumpled bandana. It was a picture of Silas, younger, smiling in front of a cabin. Behind him stood a woman Beau didn't recognize, and a boy, no more than 5, standing beside Baxter. It wasn't just a photo. It was a clue. The back of the picture had writing in Silas's hand: Josie May, don't lose this. The name meant nothing to Beau. But the way Silas wrote it, sharp, urgent, underlined twice, it wasn't casual. Josie May. Was she the woman in the photo? The boy's mother? A friend? Beau had never known Silas to be close with many people. Whatever her role, she was part of the story Baxter had brought back with him. He placed the photo on the table and leaned back. Baxter sat up, ears twitching, then walked over to the photo and sniffed it slowly. When he looked up, his tail gave a faint wag. Beau stared at him. You know her, he whispered. It wasn't a question. The dog's reaction said enough. Suddenly, a memory stirred. Silas once mentioned staying with someone in the mountains, off-grid, during a rough period. Could Josie May still be there? Beau pulled out a local map from the drawer, tracing the edge of the region where Route 19 passed through the foothills. He circled an area near Harlan Ridge, just west of the old Harper Trail. That's where Silas used to go when he needed to disappear. If Josie was still out there, she might be the only person left who could explain what Silas had done, and why Baxter was sent to find him. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and for the first time, Beau felt like someone else might already be looking for the same answers. The next morning, Beau loaded Baxter into the passenger seat of his truck and set out toward Harlan Ridge. The winding road was quiet, blanketed in mist and the golden hush of early sunlight. The further they drove, the more the world seemed to fold into itself. Cell reception dropped, houses thinned, and pine trees stood taller, denser. It was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. And that only confirmed what Beau already suspected. Silas had hidden Josie May out here for a reason. After nearly 2 hours, they came upon a rundown gas station sitting lonely at a crossroads. A hand-painted sign hung crooked over the entrance: Callahan General. Inside, it smelled of motor oil, dust, and something sweet baking in the back. A woman in her late 50s stood behind the counter, red curls tied back in a messy knot, flipping through an old book. She looked up slowly when Beau entered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're not from around here," she said. "Name's Beau Carver," he replied. "I'm looking for someone, Josie May." The woman stiffened just a little. She glanced down at Baxter, who had quietly sat at Beau's side. Her expression changed. Not fear exactly, something closer to recognition. "You drove a long way to ask a dangerous question," she said finally. Name's Ruby Callahan. And Josie doesn't take visitors. Beau stepped closer. I think Baxter belonged to someone she knew. A man named Silas Rourke. At that, Ruby blinked hard and stepped back like the name had struck her. I haven't heard that name in years, she whispered. But if you're mixed up with Silas, I'd suggest you turn around and forget this place. Beau leaned in, voice steady. He sent the dog. And there's more to this story than I was ever told. If Josie's got something to say, I need to hear it. People are still keeping secrets. People are still scared. Ruby hesitated, then finally nodded toward the back door. Cabin. 2 miles up the trail past the ridge. But don't push her, Beau. She's lost enough. Beau turned to leave, but Ruby's voice stopped him cold. There were men asking about Silas just 2 weeks ago. Not locals. Black SUV. Out-of-state plates. They didn't ask nicely. Beau froze, feeling Baxter tense beside him. What did they want? He asked. Ruby looked away. They were looking for something Silas left behind. Said it wasn't supposed to survive. Beau stepped into the sunlight again, but the air felt colder now. Whatever Silas had been hiding, someone was still hunting it. The trail Ruby mentioned was barely more than a dirt path choked by brush and low-hanging pine limbs. Beau drove as far as he could before the road vanished completely. He and Baxter continued on foot, the forest growing thicker, quieter. With each step, a sense of unease pressed heavier on Beau's chest. He wasn't just walking toward answers. He was stepping into someone else's hidden world, a world Silas had deliberately left behind. After nearly 40 minutes, they saw it. A small, weather-beaten cabin tucked between the trees, like it had grown there rather than been built. Baxter slowed as they approached, ears twitching. A soft creak came from the porch as a woman stepped into view, holding a shotgun pointed at the ground but not relaxed. She looked to be in her mid-40s, eyes sharp and shoulders squared. Her voice was calm, but carried weight. Don't come any closer unless you plan to be honest. Beau raised his hands slightly. I'm Beau Carver. I served with Silas. This dog, his name is Baxter. He came looking for me. The woman didn't lower the gun, but her eyes darted to Baxter. He took a cautious step forward, then sat down at the edge of the clearing, tail wagging gently. Her breath caught. Baxter, she whispered. The shotgun lowered. God, I thought he was gone. She looked up at Beau, tears threatening but never falling. I'm Josie May. Beau stepped forward slowly. He's been with me for 2 weeks. He found me, just like Silas said he would. Josie nodded and opened the cabin door. Come inside, before someone else sees you. Inside, the cabin was simple, handmade quilts, a wood-burning stove, a faded photo of Silas on the mantel. Josie poured 2 cups of coffee and sat at the small table, her hands trembling slightly. Silas told me that if anything ever happened to him, Baxter would try to find you. I didn't believe him, but he was right. He always said the dog knew more than any man. Beau sipped the bitter coffee, trying to make sense of it all. What was he involved in, Josie? Why all the secrecy? Josie looked down at her hands. Silas wasn't just running. He uncovered something. Documents, files, things he was never supposed to see. Government ops. Illegal stuff. People got hurt. He was trying to expose it. But before he could, he got burned. She reached under the table and pulled out a locked metal box. He left this with me. Said only to give it to you if Baxter ever came back. Beau stared at it, heart pounding. It was heavier than it looked. Outside, a branch snapped in the woods, and Beau knew they weren't alone anymore. The metal box was cold and dented in one corner, the kind of box used to store military-grade equipment or sensitive intel. Josie handed Beau a small key tied to a piece of worn leather. Her hands shook as she let it go, like she'd been carrying its weight for far too long. Baxter sat near the door, alert, eyes fixed on the tree line beyond the window. He hadn't relaxed since they arrived. Beau knelt beside the box, slid the key into the lock, and turned. Inside were 3 items: a flash drive, a folded map marked with red ink, and a photograph. one that made Beau's blood turn cold. It was of a group of soldiers overseas, but in the background, blurred but visible, was a shipment crate stamped with a government seal and the word, confidential. Only those crates had never been accounted for. Silas had mentioned something once. Missing equipment, weapons being moved off the books, people disappearing who asked too many questions. Beau had dismissed it back then as paranoia. Now he wasn't so sure. Silas said if anything ever happened to him, it wouldn't be an accident, Josie said quietly. That he was being watched. He told me to stay here, to disappear. But if Baxter ever came back, that meant something had changed. That someone else needed to know. Beau took a long breath. Someone already knows. Ruby Callahan said men were here 2 weeks ago, asking about Silas. About you. Josie's face went pale. She stood and crossed to the window, pulling the curtain back just a few inches. I haven't seen anyone. Not since winter, she said. But Baxter. He's been on edge since you got here. Beau stood, sliding the flash drive and map into his coat pocket. We need to move. If they followed me, they could already be close. Suddenly, Baxter let out a low growl. Not barking, not panicking, just warning. A sound that told Beau everything he needed to hear. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. They moved fast. Josie packed a small bag with essentials while Beau scanned the tree lean through the window. Then he saw it, just for a second, a flash of movement, the shimmer of a windshield in the distance, reflecting through the trees. A vehicle, no headlights, parked and hidden. His pulse quickened. Time's up, he muttered. We're not safe here. As they slipped out the back of the cabin, Beau couldn't help but look back once more. Silas had died trying to reveal the truth. Now someone was willing to kill to keep it buried. The forest closed around them like a fist. Josie led the way, moving quickly but quietly through the narrow trail behind the cabin. Beau followed close behind, the metal box now slung in a satchel over his shoulder. Baxter moved ahead of them both, ears sharp, every step calculated. He wasn't just running, he was tracking. The old instincts were back, and it was clear now that this dog hadn't just been trained to obey. He'd been trained to survive. Behind them, voices echoed faintly through the trees. Not yelling, coordinated communication. Men used to moving in silence. Beau didn't need confirmation. Whoever they were, they weren't law enforcement. These were the same ghosts Silas had warned about, and they were closing in. We can't outrun them forever, Josie whispered. There's a ranger station a few miles east. If we can make it there, maybe we can get a signal out. Beau nodded. Let's move. They reached a rocky incline, and Baxter suddenly froze, nose in the air. Then he growled louder this time. Seconds later, a crack rang out through the trees. A shot. Bark exploded from a tree beside Josie's head. Down! Beau shouted, pulling her to the ground as another shot echoed. Whoever was behind them had clear orders. Retrieve the box, eliminate loose ends. Josie clutched the straps of her bag, face pale but steady. I can't go back to hiding, she said. Not after all this. Beau scanned the ridge ahead and spotted an old hunter's trail leading down to a ravine. This way, he yelled, grabbing her hand. They slid down the incline, branches scraping their arms, rocks tumbling beneath their boots. Baxter darted ahead like he'd run this terrain 100 times. At the bottom of the ravine was a collapsed wooden bridge, and just beyond it, a narrow creek winding east. Follow the water, Beau said, breath ragged. It leads to the ranger station. The sun was beginning to fade, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The sound of movement behind them was constant now, boots, low radios, men trying not to be seen. But Baxter stayed close, guiding them through underbrush and sharp terrain like a shadow himself. Beau clutched the satchel tighter. The flash drive inside didn't just contain evidence. It contained names, contracts, transfers, proof that what Silas uncovered was more than rumor. And someone was willing to kill to make sure no one ever saw it. They reached the ranger station just after dusk, clothes torn and soaked from the creek. The building sat alone at the edge of the forest clearing, lights flickering weakly through the window. It looked abandoned at first, until the door creaked open and an older ranger stepped out, hand on his belt. "You folks lost?" he asked, eyeing Baxter with a mix of curiosity and caution. Beau didn't waste time. "We're being followed. We have proof of something. Something they don't want out." Inside, Josie handed over the flash drive, and Beau showed the photo and the map. The ranger's name was Emmett Harlan, a retired Marine who'd worked these woods for years. As he plugged in the drive, his expression changed. His hands stopped moving. "You realize what this is?" he muttered. "This could shake loose half of what's rotting behind government doors." Josie nodded. "That's why they're hunting us." Emmett turned toward the old radio on the wall. "We'll get it out." Before the signal could be sent, tires crunched outside. Headlights swept across the trees. Beau moved to the window. 2 black SUVs. No markings. Men stepped out, dressed in civilian clothes but moving like military. "They're here," Beau said. Emmett grabbed a rifle from behind the door. "I've held this station through snowstorms and poachers. I won't let it fall to ghosts." Josie stood tall beside him, gripping a crowbar. Baxter growled low, then barked, loud and clear. The standoff didn't last long. One of the men shouted through a megaphone, "Hand over the drive. Walk away." Beau stepped outside slowly, both hands raised. "He died trying to protect this," he said. "You want it? You'll have to tell the world why." In that moment, Emmett triggered the emergency broadcast, shortwave radio blaring a signal through secure military channels. A signal Silas had planned years before. Backups, names, files transmitted in seconds. The men outside realized too late. Sirens wailed in the distance, real ones this time. Local deputies. Federal cars. Someone had finally listened. The black SUVs peeled off into the woods. No gunfire. No bloodshed. Just retreat. Beau sank to his knees as the noise faded. Baxter trotted over, nudging his shoulder gently, like he knew. It was done. A week later, the news broke. Investigations launched. Silas Rourke's name was cleared, posthumously honored. Josie moved back into town, no longer hiding. Beau kept Baxter, of course, though he no longer saw him as a dog, but as the final messenger of a story that demanded to be told. Some truths get buried, but the ones that survive change everything.